2017, the answer was made for me because I was laid off. You start to realize how expendable you are. You think that you're a lifer and you want to retire, you want to wear the check mark loud and proud, and you put all this time and effort and energy into it, and you realize, hey, I'm just a number.
The rules that they define for you do pigeonhole you, and it works with their structure, but it's not repeatable or something that you can go and take outside of the organization and build your own. And it's probably designed that way, right? Like, you know enough to do your job, but not enough to like replicate it.
As long as I have my camera with me, I could generate income. I could stop people on the side of the street and be like, hey, let me take your portrait, take a few free ones. They're going to love it because I know that I can do something nice with that. They'll share it, and eventually I'll start a business with that. I had networked my way into a place where I knew that there was something going on in social media that I could take advantage of, and that was the influencer space. It was amazing. First 3 years, brands would contact us and say, hey, Paige, we'll pay you $10,000, and I would get a commission. I'd get a 15-20%.
Where do you see yourself going in the future?
We just scratched the surface on what we could do as Youngry, as an agency. And one of the things that we're really starting to move into is
Hey, Ludwig, welcome to Becoming You. It's so great to have you here on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I think I'm honored to be on the show. I've seen this, I've seen you, what you do and what you've been doing on the Becoming You podcast for so long that super excited to be here.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I'm actually going to be hitting 100 episodes this year. So it's awesome to have you. Yeah, on this upswing. It's a really cool experience for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm curious. I know this is interviewing me, but how has your transition been to starting a podcast and being learning the technical side of this? I mean, I know we met at Verizon, and we'll probably get to that. So I know technology isn't foreign to you, but
Right. No,
how has this transition been?
Yeah, it's a great question. And when we met, I was in the retail space and you were in your role visiting the retail stores. So my life was, customer facing, front and center, behind a counter. And of course, we were always trained to walk around the counter. So you want to remove those obstacles, those barriers for connection. When I started this podcast, it was at the start of the pandemic. So total opposite of that experience, right? In that moment, I'm isolated in my apartment in Jersey City and I'm not in front of anyone. And at that point, I had been in corporate America with Verizon for a year working in Manhattan. So I was no longer in the retail space. But immediately my heart went out to everyone that was in retail because we had no idea what was going on. And it seemed like they would be out of business before we knew it. And I just knew if that had been me back then, I wouldn't even know where to begin.
Right.
So learning the technical side was secondary to just wanting to help people get their voices heard. I had this platform on LinkedIn and I just wanted to kind of share it with people. And the first maybe even 20 episodes, I was recording everything and editing everything myself. And then as things started getting a little bit back to normal, or we were calling it our new normal, and work was picking up again and people, had busier lives and my life was busier, I wound up outsourcing the edits. And I learned so much from that too, just that experience of going from being the editor to letting someone else, and trusting them with my project. But yeah, it was cool. And I went through actually several different editors, just figuring out what I like and what I don't like. But there's such a technical side of it. People don't really know what goes into podcasting, the expense, the time, the energy. And I don't always advocate for it. I'm not always telling the story about it. So it's a great question. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah, no, listen. And I thought it was unique because I know you. So to understand what you've done in this space is really, it's really a leap from where we came from. That's what I wanted to know. And listen, you've done an amazing job. So just wanted to kind of call that out at the top.
Thank you so much. I wish I could take credit for my more recent edits, but no, I have the best editor now for the last few years. And him and his team, they just absolutely crush it. They make the short clips for me so I can promote it. And they take what I don't want to spend my time doing, they take it off my plate for me, which is huge because I get that time back and I don't have to be the expert at every single aspect of podcast production. I can just do the parts I enjoy and then outsource the rest.
So smart. I mean, you leave the things that others do well to them, and then you focus on obviously what you do well.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of that, you've always amazed me that you were able to basically walk away from corporate America and double down and bet on yourself through entrepreneurship. I know back in the day you were doing photography, specifically in the fitness space, and I followed that very closely. Like Paige Hathaway, your client, I was so enamored with her, and a lot of your clients that you had, they were just so healthy and strong. And I love that space completely, but I wanna hear, like, what your journey has been like, because obviously right now, fast forward, you're in your own podcast studio that you help other clients, leverage. People that may even be listening to this who see my podcast and think about podcasting, they may even, wanna work with you and have questions for you about that. But, like, what did that look like from going from those retail stores back in the day, and it's been, like, I don't know, 10 plus years at this point since we've known each other, to now?
2008, my daughter was born. She's turning 18 this year.
Wow, congratulations, that's huge.
So when she was born, that's when I picked up the camera, and I had already been an employee at Verizon since 2001. So I had worked my way up the corporate ladder, and I'd always thought that I would be leadership was really exciting to me back then. Uh, the idea that you work in a corporation like Verizon, and you think that you want to make changes, and the only way to make changes, you realize quickly, is you got to get to a place where you have that leverage and you have that ability. So how do you do that? Well, you got to move up. Right, you're a sales rep. You got to be a store manager. You're a store manager. You got to be a district man, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
And that was my path back then. So right up until 2008, 2009, I was following that path. I was a corporate guy. I was living that whole dream, and then my daughter was born. And one of the things that happened at that point was I picked up a camera to take photos of her, as one does when they have kids, right? You want to capture all the moments. They're so cute, they're so little, and I don't know, something about the curiosity of, like, how do I get my photos to look like these Ann Getty's babies photos at the time? And I don't know if you remember Ann Getty. She's a super famous baby photographer. She's the type of
Okay.
photographer that does, like, a little baby in a cracked eggshell, and it's just
Right,
beautiful,
right.
right? Stuff like
Yeah.
that. So I'm like, why do my photos look so bad of my child
Right.
and not like that? What is it that she's doing? So kind of that curiosity led me to down the path of YouTubing and starting to learn how to use a camera, and then going out and buying a camera, and then start shooting, and then, oh, now I got to get props, and so on and so forth. So eventually I got into photography that way. And while I'm working my way up the corporate ladder in Verizon, I'm also becoming a better photographer.
Mhm.
And then one day somebody asked me to take some photos of them in a gym. They were a competitor. I took some photos. I started sharing those photos on Facebook. One thing led to another. This is like 2012 now, where the 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 Instagram boom starts to happen.
Right,
Where
exactly. That's
um
literally the year I got in Instagram.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
same here. Like I hadn't had it prior, and everyone was like, "Hey, you're taking these photos. You should share them on Facebook." So I got Facebook, and then got into Instagram, and then all of a sudden, this boom is starting to happen on social media, where uh, people having these large followings are having so much influence. And I start sharing these photos of some fitness people. More fitness people contact me. So it happened, like, just by happenstance, right?
Yeah.
Because I hadn't set out to do that. And then quickly I realized that there weren't a lot of fitness photographers in the area. I live in New Jersey, where we met in New Jersey. Um, and I started to realize that in the photography space, when it comes to fitness specifically, there was like a handful across the country that were doing it well. And so I started getting really, really good at it, and started meeting, fitness competitors, and fitness influencers, and shooting them. And they would share my photos, and my Instagram started to grow.
Mhm.
All the while still showing up with like a suit and tie,
Right.
showing up to, like, a corporate store or authorized retailer, and working
Mhm.
and doing my job there. And I started to get pulled. One of the things that happens when you start doing stuff like this is you start to realize that, you have a passion for something, and it's not to be in corporate America and to show up to a 9 to 5 and have somebody tell you what to do, when you're like, well, I know that's not the right thing to do, or we should be doing this, but I can't, because I have to just follow orders. And I started to realize that that's not, who I am, and what I want to do. Like, I've always had kind of an issue with authority. and being told what to do, especially when you
Right.
know it's not the answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I started this journey of like living these two lives where by like 2016, 2017, it had taken its toll on me. And you have a family, you have a wife, you have children, and it's one of the toughest decisions to make, even when you're single and young, to leave safety. And it makes it even more difficult when you have a wife, you have
Mhm.
children, and you're trying to raise them, you have benefits and all these things. And
Mhm.
so it became very, very difficult. It pulled me in multiple directions. And it came to a point where 2017, the answer kind of was made for me because of, I was laid off by Verizon, you know, and
Right.
that was, one of the things that happens when that occurs in your life is you start to realize how expendable you are.
Exactly. Yeah.
When a company that you've been with for, 17 years at that point, or 16 years, and
Mhm.
you think that you're a lifer, and you want to retire of Verizon, and you want to wear the check mark loud and proud, and they appreciate, and they take care of you, and then next thing you know, you're gone just like that, one day to the next. And you put all this time and effort and energy into it, and you realize, hey, I'm just a number. Like, I wasn't doing anything special, that they couldn't fire me and bring a next guy in to do the same exact thing.
Right.
So that left me to a point where, I had developed this skill set outside, which I felt more proud about than anything else. you know I always say this, and I always have this conversation with my dad, like the idea that I, as a photographer, I developed a skill set that, if you drop me in the middle of Nebraska today, um and just said, make it, as long as I have my camera with me, I could generate income. You know what I mean? I could stop people on the side of the street and be like, hey, let me take your portrait, take a few free ones. They're gonna love it, because I know that I can do something nice with that, and then they'll share it, and eventually I'll start a business with that. Um, I couldn't start a business as an account manager or as account executive or whatever.
No.
at
Yeah,
Verizon.
exactly, exactly. The rules that they define for you do pigeonhole you, and it works with their structure, but it's not repeatable or something that you can go and take outside of the organization and build your own, and it's probably designed that way, right? Like, you know enough to do your job, but not enough to, like, replicate it, because then you'd be a competitor, and we can't have that. So, you have to stay in your lane and follow the rules, everything you said.
Yeah, and that was became so unattractive to me. Like, the more you work, the more you realize that the person that's your direct leader, your direct manager, all they did differently than you was play the game better.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's, I don't know about you, Katrina, but like the idea that playing the game um is part of how you make it in life. Like, I just, that doesn't sit well with me.
No,
I don't
it's
I
super
can't.
icky.
Yeah, it's super icky, right?
Yeah,
Like, you have to yes, and kind of, kiss ass, and do those types of things, and I was just not good at it.
yeah, and I completely relate to everything you're saying, like, and I love that you went to the amount of detail, like, telling your story because so many people can relate to it. There's lifers, there's dedicated, loyal employees in many companies who think that their company cares about them the way they care about their jobs, and the reality is they change our way of life overnight because it's a business decision, and we're not a second thought, and then we need to figure something out. So then you become very reactive in a lot of instances, especially if you have dependents, as you outlined. Like, you don't have the luxury of taking your time and figuring something out or being creative necessarily or finding what your purpose is in life. You need a job, you need a paycheck, you have bills to pay. And that puts people in these precarious predicaments, that again, the employer just does it overnight. They want the respect of a 2 weeks notice, but they give like 2-minute notice in
Oh
many
yeah,
instances.
a 1,000%, and it hurts to know that. Like, there was a point of like depression right after, because you're like, man, like, I poured my heart and soul into this. And you have the Verizon badge that you took the photo of on day one in 2001, and you're looking at that, and you're like, all the years. And but there comes a point where you turn the corner on that, and you realize, yeah, okay, I'm just a number. How do I make it so that I don't face this scenario again?
Mhm.
And so for me, it was, I can't generate the same amount of income as a photographer that I was making at Verizon. But I had networked my way into a place where I knew that there was something going on in social media that I could take advantage of,
Mhm.
and that was the influencer space. I quickly partnered up with one of the women that I used to photograph back in the day. Her name was Paige Hathaway, and she had at the time 3 million followers on Instagram, and she had just fired her manager, who was managing all of her deals, all of her inflow of brand deals that were coming her way. And me and her had always had a great relationship, obviously, because I used to photograph her, and she was living in LA at the time. I was still here in Jersey, and we connected, and she trusted me, and so I was like, I pitched myself as a manager. And again, I've never done this, but it was something that I figured I could deal with, and it
Mhm.
was it was amazing for those first 3 years.
Mhm.
Brands would contact us and say, "Hey, Paige, we'll pay you $10,000," and I would get a commission. I'd get a cut of that, 10, 15, 20%. We'd pay you 12,000, 20,000 to post this and do two reels, or do a video for our website, or fly to Australia to do a in-person appearance, and first class tickets to. So it was awesome.
Yeah, yeah, and she had a great personality for the camera. I mean, obviously, yeah, she was an influencer already, but I think seeing her through your eyes, so to speak, through the lens, right? It was an amazing experience because it made her such a real person and very tangible, because you already knew her in real life, you're working with her, obviously, and I just get to kind of, like, have a front row seat. It almost felt like I was in this inner club.
Yeah, no, you know what's cool about her too? That in person, the thing about Paige, and I'll always say this till the end of time,
Yeah.
her skill set, her superpower was doing exactly that in person.
Mm,
You would
wow,
if she walked into your house right now, or if you walked into a room where she was in, she'd make you feel like you were the only person in the room. And
wow.
even if there's 100 people,
Yeah.
and down to like, hey, oh my god, a beautiful shirt you're wearing, I love your hair, and you're like, oh my god, you're the superstar. Like,
Right, right. You see me, like,
you
it's
see
crazy.
me.
Yeah.
100%. And I watched her do this with every person in a line that's waiting for her at an expo. Every single person is like, where there's other influencers who couldn't care less, who are just punching the clock.
Right, right. And she had the energy for it too, it sounds like.
Yes. Oh, 1,000%. Like, I watched her turn it on. Like, she would have, like say, we'd be in the Uber on the way to the expo, and she'd be tired or taking a nap.
Mhm.
And then the second the door opens where she knows there's people, she turns it on. And not in a negative way, like she's faking it. Like, she's giving like, she knows that people are traveling far and wide. They're coming to see her, and they're waiting in these long lines, and she gives them the energy that they deserve. And so I got to experience that with her in Australia, in Germany, in the UK, in Austin, in LA, in Vegas, in Idaho.
What a dream to travel around like that for work, which you
100%,
wouldn't have been able to do, if you stay in the 9 to 5, like, that's not how it operates.
100%. And it was more aligned with, my dream of being a photographer and a content creator. It was definitely more in line with that, and it was paying the bills, um, which I never thought I'd do. Like, just the idea that 2 years prior, I was at a job and earning a check and not loving it, and waking up every day and not wanting to go to work, to now I'm like, yeah, booking a trip to FIBO in Germany, and
Yeah.
going to like a 23-hour flight or whatever it was to Australia, like, and experiencing this place that I never thought it was a dream. And then COVID came. COVID had as a way of just ruining a lot of things. And
I know. It's like this weird silver lining moment where, like, yes, it ground everything to a halt and we had to take inventory and stock and, like, look at ourselves. But then in so many instances, like, and things happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise, but so many other things ended too that would have just kept going, if it didn't happen.
1,000%. And for me, what happened, and for Paige, was COVID shut down the world closed, and every manufacturer had to close. And when things started to open up, there was just this super long backlog, and so brands were like, "Hey, we don't have money right now. We can't ship protein, or we can't ship, or we can't ship out any clothing apparel right now because of the supply chain issues." So we had to scale back, and that forced me to have to go back to work, because we couldn't continue working and I couldn't sustain life with my family.
Right, right. Wow. That must have been really crushing too.
Here's what I learned.
Okay, tell me.
Why I wasn't so crushed was because there were a few people in my life at the time that worked in finance. And I don't know if you know people that work in finance.
Yeah, I do.
One of the things that happens when you work in finance is you get these people that jump from like Bear Stearns to JP Morgan to Chase to
Edward Jones or Charles Schwab. Yeah.
yeah, and every time you talk to them, like, yeah, I'm at Charles Schwab now. And you're like, okay, how does that? And every time they do it, they level up. They work at Charles Schwab, and then they go to Edward Jones for a pay increase. And I know I thought about that, and I was like, why can't I do that? Why
Yeah.
do I have to be a slave to just because I get a job at Verizon doesn't mean that I can't look and try to level up. It almost kind of the idea of like, don't let them use you, you use them type of thing.
Yes, right. And once the loyalty or the trust is kind of broken, your inherent obligation that you feel goes away. And suddenly you do prioritize yourself over, the brand that wasn't even your brand to begin with. And they make it very clear it's not your brand.
1,000%.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I started to really trying to figure out how do I do this and not I'm not in finance, but how do I do this in this world? So I landed a job at T-Mobile and in business sales. Business sales, you go out and you got a cold call and do that whole thing, and that was great. And I got a great salary there. And then I leveraged that to get a job at a regional bank in New Jersey that had 21 locations, and they needed to start their business sales department. And so
Okay.
I was assistant vice president of
Awesome.
of of
Hmm.
business sales, and
Yeah.
I got a bigger increase in salary. And then this is where my partner now, Ankur, this is where he reached out to me and said, "Listen, I want to start an agency, and you're the guy I want to start it with." And Ankur had started Shreds way back in 2010,
Oh,
2011.
wow. Okay, cool.
So he was the guy that was bringing me along to the photo shoots where I met the pages,
Exactly.
Joey
Yeah.
Swoll.
That's so cool. Because I'm pretty sure I bought, like, shred stuff when you guys were doing all that to support. Because 'cause I'm like, "Wait, I know that for sure."
I don't know if you got to meet Arvin, but he was him and Ankur. Arvin was with me at Verizon when he started Shreds with Ankur.
Okay, yeah, the name sounds familiar, but I'm not sure if we did get a chance to meet or not. But it's such a small world. I love all these, like, overlaps.
Yeah. So Ankur was like, "Hey, let's do this," and he had this career where he was with Shreds forever, and then they had a falling out, so he sold his shares and did a bunch of other things, but he always kind of stayed in that supplement CPG space, right? Where consumer product goods space. So he understands that space so well, from manufacturing to the marketing to everything surrounding it. So
Mhm.
he has such a big network that we could go out and get brands to come to us for their marketing services. So at the time, like I said, I was an AVP at a bank, and I was like, you know what? It's now or never type of thing for me to really do this on my own. And now that I have help and we're in a whole different space, let's make the leap. And in 2023, what year is this? 2026?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Flying.
2020, so in 2023, I made the leap. I left the bank. And I started working with Ankur, and we started an agency called AKG Creative, which are his initials. We then changed it to Youngry, which is young and hungry.
Yeah.
First year, we did seven figures. Part of that journey led us to think about our space because we had an office here in Springfield, and we are like, what can we do with the basement so that we can create content for the brands that we're getting hired of? And that led us to build this studio called Flexwork Studios. And we started building these podcast spaces because we realized that, as you know, podcasting is so important. Um, and now we have a separate business that serves as people hire us, they come and rent the space, and we book out studio space, and people come in and record their podcast. I'm sitting in one of the rooms now, and
So cool, yeah. What an amazing, like, journey, though, going from those retail stores to literally sitting in your own podcast studio that you rent out, like, just wild.
1,000%. Like, and there's so many learnings there, like from the retail space, like how you think about how customers perceive your space, whether it's a retail space like this or even just an office space, or how they perceive your brand. So all of those learnings I've been able to utilize, in this during this journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you've definitely not only utilized those learnings for yourself, but for others as well. You know, clients, people who follow along on your journey, maybe even are just lurking, right? They're not even telling you that they're watching, but they're learning from you because you have been such an open book. You've been very transparent of this is what I'm doing in my life now, follow along. You write very thoughtful posts that explain, the day in the life or what you're seeing in the market. And it's honest. We need that authenticity in business because it's just humans. Like it's just people, business relationships. That's all it is. And to have just the facade or the walls up, it doesn't do anyone any good. So I love the approach that you're taking.
It doesn't do anyone any good. And to be honest, Katrina, I have so much to learn from you on that end because although I share, I don't share enough. And that's personally, I'm one of those like what do they say? Those that don't do teach, or those that
Right.
don't.
That's so true.
So
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm better at teaching it than I am of doing it, and
Yeah.
so I feel like I need to learn the art of getting out there more and sharing my journey from someone like yourself because you do such an amazing job with it.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that. I actually help people do that because I do see it as such a need. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to like have that conversation because especially in corporate America, it's so hard to know your personal brand and have an individual feel or look and feel for yourself that's separate from your employer. And a lot of people don't know how to play in that space. And you mentioned financial, folks in finance or financial advisors specifically, there's so much red tape for them that it really inhibits them from even being able to post about themselves. So if you're in a place in your life where you can post about yourself, you really should take advantage of it because this is our digital footprint. It's our legacy that we leave behind. It's who we are. Like we get to tell this story. No one else can tell it for us. And you kind of take that away from people too, from letting them tell the story of you.
Yeah,
Like you want to own that narrative completely. So I think you're doing a great job. Even when
thank
Youngry
you.
came on the scene, I was like, to me, that is Ludwig. Like Ludwig is young and hungry. Like that to me
That's
was like
awesome.
synonymous completely. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. To me, it is something that I feel like the name it speaks so much for what we stand for. Even though I'm older, I feel like I still feel like my energy and my mindset is young. Like I'm not even a millennial. Like I'm Gen X.
Oh,
I'm
wow. Yeah.
older.
See, I never would have known that.
I like to think that my daughters. I have two that are in their mid teens, and I like to think that I can keep up with the Joneses when it comes to the changing culture and keeping that young mindset helps me, helps especially in this business, because a lot of what marketing is staying on trend and understanding what's going on out there and how do we pick up on this and get our customers to jump in on this thing that is really moving the needle for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And just having a pulse on the market, right? Of like, what are people up to? Yeah. And then how do you either expound on that or, in a lot of cases, like monetize it or maximize it. But if you're not aware of what's going on, you can't speak to it at all. So you may as well just be in the loop. Otherwise, you do become really outdated so quickly, especially with technology, but just any generation that's not staying in the loop, staying informed, speaking with people outside of their bubble, they just lose touch. And it can happen so quickly. Yeah.
1,000%. I was talking to my brother who's older than me. I'm gonna say he's 52. Jesus.
Wow, yeah. Lots of wisdom there.
Yeah, if you look at him, you'll be like, he doesn't look 52. He looks a lot younger. But um, I always try to the people who criticize like this generation for their social media use or their phone use, and I'm like, we got to remember our parents are criticizing us too for listening to hip hop or wearing our baggy jeans and or playing video games was our generation's social
Yeah.
where it was going to rot our brains and all that. So I was like, we have to be really careful with how we talk about this new generation, because if you vilify that and you're not into what they're doing, you're going to be like a dinosaur, just like we thought our parents were dinosaurs. My parents had no idea what I was into and what was going on. We were just so closed off. And all they did was criticize us for doing these things.
Right.
And so I think it's funny to your point of like staying in the know, and I make it a point to do that because I don't want to be fossilized. If you know,
Exactly, exactly. And I think probably your clients, like if I'm putting myself in their shoes, probably turn to you because you are staying at the forefront of everything. So you kind of take that responsibility or pressure off of them. And I know you help with marketing, and obviously you have this studio if people want to come in person. What are you seeing moving the needle the most in their businesses, or where are you seeing like the greatest opportunities where it's like a total blind spot to them? They're not even aware of it.
I think businesses are led by people that are, for the most part, agnostic to social media, and there's so many people out there. You know, it's kind of like you look at social media, and the people that are making money are these young people. Like they're just out there doing it. They don't care. They just
Yeah, they're not
you know
waiting for permission or
they're
any of
not waiting for
that.
permission. Whereas like this Gen X, millennial, and even Boomer generation, they're like, um, that is the biggest blind spot. Where we come in is on content creation and making sure that we go out there and make the type of content that brings a business's um, essence into the 2026 into this time and space. Um, a lot of businesses are just getting into it for the first time. On both the Youngry side, which is marketing, but on this side as well, we have this 100-year-old insurance company that's located in Morristown. That's now the CEO, and we're talking about insurance, which is the most boring
I know.
topic of all
Yeah.
time. They realized, and they come to us to create a podcast for them where they just share the podcast internally to their team, just so that they can stay up with the Joneses, right? So the CEO is there talking about um, whatever their insurance and whatever what do they call those uh, the tables that tell you not amortization, but anyway they
Okay. Like some graph that they make?
yeah,
Okay.
and they're just talking about boring
Yeah,
insurance stuff.
honestly, my eyes and brain glaze over with, like, too much technical speak, so I get that.
Yeah. So they realize the need to make information sexy and more fun
Right,
and
more
more engaging,
accessible exactly,
more accessible.
engaging, yep.
And this is like like there were the 1800s, I think, is when this company came to be, and
So
now their
crazy.
CEO is doing this content, and it's
Yeah.
so I think the blind spot is content creation, and their competitors are doing it. Lawyers, legal. I don't know how many law firms we've had come in to try to create content where they're speaking to camera and doing these video sales letters to camera, or getting a guest to come on and doing some, hey, what did we do for you? Let's talk about it. We have an
Mhm.
immigration lawyer who's trying to get the word out on immigration law and how he can help, and it's all these types of old school kind of businesses
Right.
that are now realizing that they need to get in the game or they're going to get left behind because the newer younger guys are in the game, you know.
Yes, yes. And you know what huge company comes to mind that's doing this? Also red, but not the check mark, is TED, like the TED Talks. They used to be so sterile and uniform, and obviously you can listen for an hour and get this huge brain dump like downloaded into you, and you feel like, wow, this person's amazing. I want to sit at their feet. But now they've pivoted where they have the current experts on that are bringing such different lively energy, and the entire
Yeah.
basically like the platform has changed. The way that their speakers present and what they're talking about is so different, even though you could look at each generation or each time frame and see these as the people that are speaking with influence over a given, time period or over a given group of people. So it's really interesting. Whether it works or not is who knows, but like you're saying, it's just staying relevant and it's trying something new, so you don't just get dismissed over, and chosen over by someone else, basically.
You bring up a good point too, because podcasting isn't new. It's you know 20 I don't know 2017, I remember saying to Paige, 2018, 2019 actually, that she needed to get one, and that was, that's 8 years ago. Now I feel like there's a serious boom on podcasting. It's been around for a long time, and now people are trying to figure out within the space of podcasting, how can we iterate and still make it fresh. It's not enough just to podcast. It's more now like, hey, cinematic, do we get cinematic cameras and do cinematic and make it look like a movie, this podcast? Or
Yeah.
are we doing podcasts on the street? So you get man on the street type stuff,
Mhm.
you know, iterating and trying to create that. That's kind of the new game of trying to make things fresh in this format. And I'm excited to see what happens in the next few years if podcasting is even the thing, or is it AI or whatever.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. When I started my podcast in 2020, so just on the cusp of when you and Paige were talking about it wasn't even with the idea of I'm starting a podcast, right? It was like I'm recording a conversation and I want everyone to have access to it. And it was rudimentary in that way because the only people that had podcasts were like the famous people. It
Yeah.
wasn't like
Yeah.
every regular person. Now it seems that anyone can really have a
Anyone
podcast,
can.
but what are you doing with it? And I think there's such value with the long form content of just recording, in this case, 30, 45 minutes, and then being able to splice it up. And now you have a ton of content that you can share across all your
Across
different
all platforms.
channels. Yeah,
Yeah.
all platforms. And you can repurpose it for, however long you want to keep using it. And then obviously, like, you can double click on it in the future too, if you ever want to go back and revisit it. But I agree with you. Like, what will that look like in the future? And the man on the street or woman on the street who's ever doing these like in person, quick chats, it's a quick chat. I mean, you can't stop someone for an hour on the sidewalk. You get 30 seconds, maybe
Yeah.
5 minutes with them if you're lucky. But it's sound bites, so it takes a lot of energy and you have to really be on it. That to me would be the version of like door to door sales that I started my
Yeah.
career in, right? Or cold calling. Like you have to be so punchy to grab people's attention, not only online, but the person you're talking to on the street.
Yeah. Yeah. And to me, for personally, that's a skill set I don't have. I don't know if you feel that you
Yeah,
have that.
that's out of my comfort zone, I'll tell you. Although I did start in door to door sales, like I can do it one to one, but to keep all of these things in my head of like, yes, I want to capture this person in front of me, but I also want to capture the attention of the millions who could see it online. It's a lot to juggle in that moment. So anyone who does it well, I give them a lot of credit.
It is, and that points to another part of this kind of era that we're into now, where brands also have to, if they're hiring an outside agency to do this, that's one thing, but it puts a value on employees and hiring the right people on your team to manage either your social or your content. So if you're not going to come to an agency or a podcast studio to do this, and you're going to hire, there's a premium now on these types of like, I want to say young, but they don't have to be young. Like people that have that skill set, this social media skill set of identifying what the trends are, and
Mhm.
in being and having the courage to go out and do that on behalf of your company, whatever it is. If it's trying to help the CEO get out of his comfort zone to create content for the brand for their company, you got to hire the right person to do that. And we found here when we hire people that we're not always going to find the right person. It takes us a special skill set to do that. And so I think companies should be paying attention to that. Hiring, because everybody hires a social media coordinator for their company now. But are you hiring the right person? You
Right,
know,
right.
does that person know what they're doing?
Exactly, and I think the first person who comes to mind is someone very organized, but is a very organized person gonna be bubbly enough to go on the
Right.
street, you know? So,
Exactly.
there's definitely different skill sets there, and I think a huge opportunity for employers and bosses alike is to trust the people that you hire, like, you hire them for a reason, so give them a little bit of leeway to run with the brand and promote the brand the way they see fit and see how it goes. That's where, these opportunities to just give your employees that power um, can kind of make or break, this free marketing, this free accessibility that you have at your fingertips. And some brands are a little more comfortable with that than others. And there's definitely ways of going about it. If you want to have like a whole brand or legal process to review the content before it goes live, but to just give people this opportunity, it puts more autonomy and it builds confidence in them, right? And it just lets them feel more connected to the brand. And if they're advocating for your brand and they work for you and it's authentic, genuine, that's going to go so much further than just the CEO saying, eat my cheeseburger, and he's barely nibbling
Right.
on it. And we all know who I'm talking
Ye-
about there.
Yes. Yeah, we do. I agree 100%. And but that just goes towards to leadership, and who's the CEO, and what their leadership style is, and how much of their company are they willing to let go of. And I think that's, that's a problem too that we're facing a lot of, just bad leaders. Bad leaders have always been around. Poor leadership has always been around, and it's just a matter of um, how we identify them and how we can coach them.
Exactly, yeah. No, I love that. This has been so fruitful already. I love how many things we covered during this segment
Yeah,
too.
we are all over the place.
Totally, totally, and it's awesome. And just in the spirit of the becoming journey, like, you shared, basically your past through professional experiences and a little bit about your personal life. I think you and your wife are a huge power couple, so I always love seeing you guys, like, share your posts about how long you've been together or what you're up to. I don't know, it's just I find it so inspiring. So I wanted to plug that in, I guess,
I
and
appreciate
just
that.
have you like kind of keep that up. But also, where do you see yourself and your life going in the future too? Because that's a huge part of becoming, right? Like we never just arrive, we're never done. And obviously, we can look backwards and see how far we've come. But where do you see yourself going in the future?
Well, we just scratched the surface on what we could do as Youngry as an agency, and one of the things that we're really starting to move into is content creation, but on the scale of like last year we did a reality show that we're pitching to Hulu and Netflix.
Wow, that is
And
awesome.
yeah, it is awesome. It's centered around the peptide space and GLP-1s and all that, and these guys that are at the top of that world. And so we think that moving into more of the high end content creation is where we'll be. Whereas I would see that Youngry would be more of a studio, and maybe even filmmaking. We'll get to that level.
Hmm.
But telling documentary style stories right now, I think, is where we're moving towards. That'll help brands. And I think that's another blind spot for brands. Creating either having a brand create their own channel, their own YouTube channel, that where they're telling documentary style stories with their brand. I think that's a big miss for a lot of brands that can afford to do so. So I think that Youngry will evolve to that. That's what I see. 5 years from now, I believe that's where we'll be, in that kind of documentary space,
Hmm.
content creation, and not just marketing, but really creating some good visual
Right.
stories.
No, that's awesome. I'm a huge fan of documentaries. It really feels like you're going behind the scenes and you're getting the truth, which we're all so hungry for the truth, especially with the uproar against legacy media, for instance, and then having, your average Joe on the street recording the news for us. So then it feels like, okay, that's the truth. So anything that we can do to make people feel more brought into this story in an authentic way, I think is going to be where things go in the future. And I love that Younger is like ahead of that and really focused in
Yeah,
that area. I can't wait to see, who you bring into that ecosystem. And I love that you're already getting plugged in with these streaming services because that's where everyone is, right? If you're not on those, it's cool, but it's probably like better for, I don't know, a cinematic fair, like a Ren fair or something, but for movies?
yeah. No, I'm excited about it too. I mean, the idea that we would have come from where we were to possibly having something on a Hulu or Netflix is crazy to me, and it just opens up the sky for so much opportunity. And with so many streamers that are coming on board, like, 3 years ago there wasn't a Peacock or Paramount Plus. Now they're there, and now there's all the opportunities and other streamers that are going to pop up over the next few years that'll help us even more.
Yes, so true. It's always great that there's a competitive landscape too, because
Yeah.
we don't want to just have monopolies telling us what to do or what to watch or what we're, allowed to have. So that's huge. And I love that you continue to build all of these different relationships and partnerships in the business space because it goes such a long way. And then when I get to see you on Hulu and Netflix, I'm like, yo, I know that
I,
guy.
I know that guy. Yep.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I can't
Yeah,
wait.
me neither. This was amazing, Ludwig. I so
Thank you.
appreciate you being on the show. Is there any, final thought, anything we didn't cover that's top of mind that you want to share?
No, honestly, I just want to, whoever's listening, if you're in that 9 to 5, I think that's the biggest message. I think 2020 taught us, you saw so many people leave their 9 to 5s, whether willingly or unwillingly for whatever reason, and then start these journeys where they became woodworkers, or they started their own Etsy shop, or whatever the case is. I think more of that needs to continue to happen. And I know it's a calculated risk, and sometimes it's a difficult risk to take, but if you have a passion, I think that's kind of the message I always want to push out. Like, and there's always people to help you, not to do it alone. Seek assistance, reach out to people for mentorships. But the idea that you have to be stuck in this 9 to 5 is not, you know, it's not a two-way loyalty relationship, number one. And number two, it doesn't have to be. So, I think that's kind of what I want to reiterate with my
Mhm.
message.
No, I
And
love
people like
that.
you and me are here to help.
Yes, we're here to help and we're living it. We're not just telling you that you should do that or it's possible, but we're actually living it out. So,
Yeah, 1000%.
yeah, perfect final words. It's already getting my own brain flowing and being like so optimistic about the future for both of us
Yeah,
and for anyone
we should be.
listening who it resonates with. So, thank you so much, Ludwig. You are
Thank you for
awesome.
having me.
Yeah,
I
it's my
appreciate it.
pleasure. This is amazing. You are my most important listener, and I can't thank you enough for spending your time with me. If this content resonates with you, then hit subscribe. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube by following @ConnectorQueen. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you again on the next episode of Becoming You.